Today we are assembling one of our regular sized ice shuttles. This install video will also cover the deluxe shuttle. Both units are assembled, use the same hardware, use the same batteries, everything is exactly the same. So today we are going to show you how to assemble a 106 Garmin with a SL10 black box and LVS34 transducer, a Powerhouse lithium 30 amp hour battery, and a couple other little connectors for the charger and also the wiring harness on our ice shuttles. So with that, we're going to get started. All right, with each of our ice shuttles, you're going to receive a 2-position switch. So there's 2 banks here. You can also buy these switches off Amazon if you would like. If you'd prefer to have a single switch with a USB port or just 2 single switches, you can buy those yourself. Otherwise, we do offer them. You're going to receive a battery strap for holding your battery in place, a hardware kit for all the hardware you're going to need, 4 rubber feet, a handle with a non-slip rubber grip finish. We're going to call this the bottom of the box. So you can see where the switch cluster will go. Also on the bottom, you'll have the 4 holes for your rubber feet. And then you'll have the sides. Both sides are exactly the same. So there's no left and right. You don't have to worry about it. Both of them are exactly the same. And then we've got our graph plate where we'll mount the gimbal, and then also the black box will mount on the back side here. So with that, we are going to start assembling. I find the easiest way to start is to start with the rubber feet. So we're going to start with a foundation and build up. All right, so we are going to start with our rubber feet. In your hardware package, you're going to see that each one of the components has its own layout. So the top bolts, there's 2 1/4-inch bolts and washers. Those are for the handle. The switch hardware is usually the next one. There's some flathead screws with a Phillips bit, and then there's some longer screws, 4 washers and 4 nuts. Those are the ones that we'll be using to hold the rubber feet to the bottom. So we've already got a set of hardware unpackaged. So we're going to take the screw, insert it into the foot, and then we're going to insert it through the bottom of the box, washer on the inside, and then nylock nut. And I am going to put all these together before I tighten anything up. All right, so you will need an 1/8 inch Allen wrench, and I run it in my driver, and then a 3/8 wrench. So we're going to go ahead and tighten the screws down that hold the feet on. All right, so as you can see, we have our feet installed onto the bottom of the shuttle. So now we are going to start with the switch. I find that the switch is easier after you get the feet on, but you can do either one of those in either order. Again, the large deluxe shuttle and the standard shuttle all get assembled the exact same way. All right, so we have our switch. As you can see, it's a 2-gang switch. And you can set this up however you would like. If you want to use one for the black box and one for the graph, you can do that. Or if you want to run one for the black box and say one for a glow cup. The switch does come pre-wired, positive and a negative wire. And then there are 2 spades on the back side that's where you will connect your positive wire for the head unit or the glow cup or the black box, however you decide to wire it, but those are there. All you've got to have is a spade connector, and then those 2 will attach there. The grounds will then go back to the battery, but again, we will show you a little bit later on how to build the wiring harness for that. So again, when we go to install, the nylite has to be up. We're going to insert it through the opening. All right, so we have our hardware for our switch. They are a flat-headed cap screw with a Phillips bit or a machine screw. So you can kind of see the Phillips head. So we are going to insert those through the switch panel and into the box. Sometimes the powder coat might be a little bit thicker, so we're just going to use our screw gun and we are going to screw them in. All right, and then from the inside, we are going to install a flat washer and a nylock nut on each of those screws on the inside. All right, so to tighten these up, we have our screw gun. I like to use these little pliers. They're kind of a cross between a crescent wrench and a channel lock. I think they're a Nipex or a Nipix. Super handy. If you don't have a set of these, you'll find yourself using them all over the place. So, gonna hold the nut on the inside. All right, we have our feet installed, we have our switch installed. So now we are going to start assembling the sides of the box. So again, we'll go back to our hardware kit, and normally it's this package down here. There should be 20 screws, 20 nuts, and 20 washers. So that is the next form of hardware that we're gonna need to start assembling the sides. All right, we have our hardware for all of our sides. We have a 3/8 wrench. We have our driver with an 1/8 inch Allen wrench in it. Again, there's no left or right to the side pieces, but you will be able to tell that you cannot switch these around. The holes will not line up, so that it's not going to work. It'll only line up one way. So the L portion of the side plate is going to be, this side is going to go on the same side as the switches. So we're going to take our side plate, it's going to fit right on like that. The way I like to do it is I like to insert all the screws and then put the washer and the nylock nut on the inside, and I'll do both sides before I tighten any screws down. That way, if the box is sitting a little uneven on a bench that you may have, the box is not twisted and it doesn't want to rock if you have it sitting on a flat surface. So now we're going to go ahead and install all the screws, washers, and nuts. All right, so we have both sides on. Now we're going to grab our 3/8 wrench and our driver with an 1/8 inch Allen wrench, and we're going to start tightening. But the way I like to do it is I like to start in the upper corner, and I'll do both sides, and then I'll just kind of follow down and around as we go. Again, we'll start up here, go down, and we'll go all the way to the front, and we'll go from the left side of the shuttle to the right side of the shuttle, and we'll just go in order, left to right, and so on. All right, so we have the shuttle all tightened up. It's sitting nice and flat. It's not wanting to cock. So at this point, what I like to do is mount the gimbal and the black box onto the center shelf before we proceed. And then after we get done to that point, we will show you how to do the wiring harness and then also mount the battery in the shuttle, and then we'll be able to wrap up the entire shuttle. All right, so we have our gimbal for our 106. We have the SL10 black box, and then we also have our center plate. The gimbal will mount here, the black box will mount on the back side. So we are going to start by assembling the GLS10 onto the back. So there are multiple ways that you can mount this black box. You can mount it with the ports coming up. This, in my opinion, is the better way to do it. It's easy to disconnect the transducer to make it more portable. So if you're going to be ice fishing with it a lot, or moving it from boat to boat, or traveling with it, to me this makes more sense to do it this way. You can also mount it this way so that it will sit on the back. The connectors will then run down into the box, but you have to be more careful about your battery and then also getting your transducer connected to the larger port. It's going to be a little bit trickier to get the cord run down into the box and then back up. That's why I prefer to mount them with the connectors up. So to mount this, I have some number 10 screws, or just some button head cap screws. I put a washer on the outside and then one on the inside. I always use nylock nuts. So we're going to get this first one put in place, and then the other one. So we're going to put a washer, again, both sides. All right, so now we have our GLS 10 mounted to the center plate. Now we're going to work on mounting the gimbal. Again, make sure that the gimbal is facing the correct direction. You want your ports on the back side to face this back plate. So we'll set it there. Normally, how I set these up on a 10 is, if you can see this opening for your wire cables, it's a pretty good slot. You still want it to have a little bit where you can get your connectors in. That tends to be a really nice location. It'll still give your 10 enough to tilt forward and back, or just vertical, depending on where you're mounting it or how you're having it mounted on the boat. So again, number 10, 1032 little screws. These are 3/4 of an inch long. I like to put the button head on the underside, so that way you've got more clearance for your battery. We don't want to use, throwing stuff all over the place. You don't want to use a longer bolt and then run it down and then have this section of the bolt cause issues hitting the top of the battery. So again, always put the head on the bottom and then put the nut on the top. So we're going to go ahead and get the first bolt started. Washer and a nylock. So as I'm doing this, instead of struggling, I'm just going to make this easier. I'm going to remove the docking station from the gimbal, and now we've got all kinds of room. All right, so we have our gimbal mounted. We can go ahead and reattach our docking station. Again, the ports go towards the back wall, so we can get that reinstalled. And I think our graph is going to sit just about at that angle. So that's where we'll momentarily set it. So from here, that is assembled, that's ready. So now we are going to work on the little wiring harness that will attach the battery to the switch cluster on in the ice shuttle box. All right, so the next step of building the wiring harness for your ice shuttle. This may look intimidating, but it's not. These are just some tools that I have bought over the years that make any type of wiring really easy. One place that I found that has a lot of really good products is a company called PowerWorks. Powerworks.com. They have a really good crimping tool. They also make these solder butt connectors, trying to keep it from glaring. But you can put two wires together, it shrink tubes so it seals the wire, and then there's also a solder band in there. So when you heat it with a hot air gun, it will actually melt, and then it will solder both of those connectors together. They work really, really well. If you don't have a solder gun, or if you're not used to doing it that way, this is a great option. PowerWorks also makes a really good shrink tube. I use a lot of shrink tube. You're gonna look at this harness and say that's kind of overkill, but if you've ever dealt with a boat with terrible wiring, you will understand why. I go to the depths that I do to use the shrink tube to keep wires from splitting and everything else. So you're gonna see me using these. Again, we're using Powerhouse Lithium 12 volt 30 amp hour battery. This one is the tall. The wide from them also works really well. I almost prefer the wide, but we're out of stock on those, so the tall one it is. And then we will also have the 2 wiring harnesses. We are not going to remove the fuse blocks. We are going to just add connectors to both of these, and it'll make it just a simpler, easier setup. So we're going to start with the main power cable that you're going to use for from the battery to the switch cluster, and then also to the black box. This is just double 10 gauge wire. I usually buy it in like 250 or 300 foot roll. Works really well. How I'm going to start, and again, this is how I do it. You can do it however you want. It's just I have found the best results this way. It works really well. So I'm going to split these 2 wires. I'm going to split it back maybe 6 or 8 inches. And then I have a wire stripper. I'm going to cut that negative wire. That will get disposed of. And then on both of these, I'm going to strip it back about 1/4, maybe 3/8 of an inch on either side of those. Actually, it needs to be more than that. It needs to be about 3/4 of an inch on either one. You can always trim it if you decide that it is too long, which we may end up trimming. And then on this end, I'm going to split it back as well. And I'm going to split it about far enough that we know that we can make it work on the battery. So then from there, to keep this wire from splitting even more, I'm going to take some really good shrink tube and I'm going to cut about a 1 inch section. And I'm going to slide one on here. This one's going to come all the way down and shrink on down here. I'm going to cut another 1 inch section. And I'm going to put it on this end to keep this from splitting any further. So to make this easy, we do have to make a butt connector here. All right. So on this end, we need 2 small eyelets. And these eyelets will go on the battery. There'll be a screw that goes through there. I don't like these yellow connectors. One, I think they look terrible, and I don't like them. So I take and I grab the eyelet and I'll twist it a little bit, and this yellow will come off. Fits pretty tight. You may need to have pliers to hold it. So I pull this off of both of those yellow connectors. So those will end up being no good. So now you're left with these 2 yellow connectors, or 2 yellow eyelets. So we're going to go over to our box of shrink tube, and we have 2 small pieces of shrink tube that we've already cut, and they're already pre-cut. So I'm just going to use those 2 pieces of shrink tube. I'm going to close my box up so I don't make a mess. I'm going to slide the black one on the black wire, the red on the red wire. Now I'm going to strip these about 1/4 of an inch on each one. So I'm not sure if you can see that very well. So twist the wire a little bit. I'm going to slide the eyelet on, trying to get all those little wires into the eyelet. And I'll do the positive side now. Slide that on. And now I have a good crimper, and as you can see on the crimper, there is a yellow, a blue, and a red. That shows you what size. Normally, if I've taken the yellow off, I'm going to move to the blue. I'm going to go ahead and crimp this. And I definitely needed to go with the yellow so that way it would collapse all the way down. So if you collapse it, it'll release. So now we're going to do the negative wire. Same way. And now we have a really good secure crimp. So again, what I'll do is slide the shrink tube up onto the connectors so that way we can shrink tube them. You don't want to slide the shrink tube up too far. You don't want to slide it up too far to cover the eyelet. So I usually go over about to the quadrant of the circle. So if you see that, have two ends that are really nice looking, professionally done. I shouldn't say professional, but they both look really nice. Again, we have the shrink tube that's set up, so now these wires aren't going to split any further. Now we're going to go to the end that will connect to the switches and the ground wires. So you will need just some small black wire. And I'm not sure what size this is. It looks probably like about 16 gauge. So what I am going to cut is I'm going to cut 3 wires about 6 inches long, and I'm going to cut 1 wire about 12 inches long, and I'll show you why. So we're going to go about 6 inches, a little bit over, and I'm going to do 3 of them just like this. So 3 of them that way, and I'm going to do another one that's going to be, say, 12 to 14 inches long. I'm going to set that aside. So what we're going to do now is we're going to strip all these wires so there's about 1/2 of an inch of exposed wire. So we're going to go through, do all these. All right, so we're going to combine all of our stripped wire ends together. And what I'll do is usually kind of twist them all together like that. And hopefully this should work, otherwise I'm going to have to hopefully this should work, otherwise I'll have to redo it. So again, we're going to go back to the PowerWorks butt connectors, and they make this yellow one. And we know that this big wire that we're using is 10 gauge wire. So I'm going to grab the 10 gauge butt connector, and I'm going to slide it onto the negative wire. And then I'm going to take these 4 that we just stripped, and I just had them come apart. So we're going to retwist them and see if we can get all these to combine into the same butt connector. So you'll kind of have to press them. And so what I'm seeing is my 10 gauge wire is a little bit too long, so I'm going to trim that down just a little bit. And I'm guessing this one's going to be a little bit long, so I'm going to trim this one down a little bit So now they're about 1/2 of an inch long on either one. So I'm going to put the 4 wires through. And I had one of the little seal moved on me, so I am going to just grab another connector. So we're going to slide this onto the negative wire, and we're going to leave it about halfway on the stripped portion. And I'm going to take the 4 that I had, that I combined, and we're going to just gently start pushing the 2 together so that the 2 wires overlap each other. So I'm going to try and show it the best I can. But you can see that the wires are overlapped. So now that we know the wires are overlapped, we're going to grab our hot air gun and we're going to start heating this, and you'll notice the shrink tube will shrink. So we'll get it shrunk on so none of the solder wants to creep out. And then if you just focus on the solder section, you'll see that the plastic will start melting really good, and then all of a sudden you'll notice the solder will disperse and it will basically shrink into the copper wire, and now we just soldered that joint. And I kind of like to rotate it from one side to the other best I can. All right, so I saw the solder. So what we're going to do is we're going to let that set just a little bit to let that connector cool back down. In the meantime, we are going to work on the positive connector. So this positive wire is going to have to get married to the positive wire on the switch. So we did strip it off. We have plenty of wire, so we're going to cut some of that off. And basically we're going to use the same type of connector to connect these two. So we're going to go back and we're going to grab another one of those connectors. We're going to slide it over the end. And then we're going to grab our ice shuttle where the switches are. All right, so we have our shuttle and we have our positive wire. We're going to slide the positive wire in so it overlaps over the 2 wires total. And grab our hot air gun. We're going to start shrinking that shrink tube, and then it will also end up shrinking onto the smaller wire. And then you're going to see the solder shrink together. Kind of rotate it around so it gets distributed evenly. All right. Again, we're going to wait a couple seconds in order for that connector that plastic to go ahead and set up, and that way it'll be nice and straight and we won't have a big horseshoe in our wires. All right, so we have our butt connector for our 4 wires and our positive wire going to the switches. Now we're going to need to connect the negative wire. This negative wire will illuminate the LED switches or the LED lights in the switches. So we're going to grab one of our smaller wires. And how I like to do it is I will kind of run everything, take that smaller wire, run it straight with the red until those 2 meet, so everything's about the same length. So I need to trim this one off just a little bit. I'm going to strip back about 1/2 of an inch. I'm going to go to my PowerWorks connectors, and I'm going to grab one for the blue wires. For the blue size. That should be the correct size. So again, I'm going to slide this onto the negative wire, the negative wire from the switches. They're going to overlap. And I'm going to grab the hot air gun and I'm going to shrink tube this as well. All right, just keep that wire straight for a little bit. Like I said, these connectors work really, really well. They seal the wire, they seal the connection, plus they've got the solder in it. If you prefer to use a solder gun and shrink tube, absolutely. The ones that I do not recommend using is just the butt connector that does not have the shrink tube on it. There's like a weatherproof butt connector. Always use those if you're going to crimp them. Never use the ones that are just a rigid plastic where you put the wires in and you crimp them. You're going to get corrosion in there, especially if you're fishing, you know, in the summer or in the winter with moisture. You're always going to get corrosion, and you may end up having an issue with you know, connectors not being, you know, getting corroded and then them not making a good contact. So, all right, these are set up. Both of those are good. So now we've got our shuttle set off to the side, and we still have two wires for our positive and negative on the power cable for the graph, and then also for the black box. So we're going to go ahead and connect those now. So again, both these wires can get stripped back about 1/2 of an inch. Push my mess off to the side, and we have both of our power wire or negative wires here. So it does not matter which one you start with. We're going to grab 2 more of the shrink connectors, close up our box before we drop it, and then we have a real mess. So we're going to slip this over the connector, so that way they're both overlapping to each other. I'm going to grab my hot air gun. And then I'm going to shrink this on. Like I said, really easy, simple way of doing it. If you prefer to use just a standard shrink tube or just a butt connector crimp, that's fine as well, but I have found these actually work really, really well. All right, so that one's done. And grab our other wire, slide it over. Slide the other wire in. All right, we're going to let both of those wires cool. So for the positive side of things, we have another type of connector, and I buy these from Tacoma, but they are the same way. They're just a spade connector that will slide onto a spade. They're the female side of a spade connector. They can be crimped and soldered. And on these, I actually do that. I'll slide it in to the connector, and then I will crimp it and then I will grab the hot air gun and I'm going to shrink tube this one on as well. And you'll be able to watch that solder ring, and then as soon as it gets hot enough, it's going to melt, and you're going to see the solder flow into the connector and into the wire. It works really, really nice. All right, we have that one done, and we have one more that we're going to do, and then we'll be done with this side of it. And I actually forgot to crimp that one, but the solder actually looks great. It flowed all the way around. So that one looks perfect. I'm not even going to bother crimping that one. But I know they give you a choice. You can crimp or you don't need to crimp. I crimped one and I didn't crimp the other one, and both of them look great. So again, these are going to connect to the spades on the inside of the shuttle. So before we start laying any of that out, we are going to basically get the battery in place along with the battery strap. So again, on this connector, or on the power for the 120, or the 106, there's a blue and a brown wire. You will not use these brown wires. There is wire exposed on the end of them, and they are long. You don't need them that long. So what I will end up doing is just wrapping the wire a little bit, and then I will end up getting a piece of black tape just to tape over that, so that way those wires don't cause a problem later on. But I'm just going to leave it like that until I can grab a piece of black tape, and then we'll get that wrapped up. So right now, we are going to go back to working on the battery and the battery strap. All right, so we have all of our electrical connectors done, along with the cables for the black box and the head unit. As of right now, we're going to start putting the battery in place, and we're going to show you how to strap it in place. But first, we need to connect our connectors onto the battery. And if you remember, all right, we're going to install the battery into the bottom of the ice shuttle. Before we install the battery and the battery strap, we need to make sure to connect the large black and red wires to the top of the battery. So most batteries have a spade style connector where it'll have a male spade. You'll need a female connector that will slide onto it. The powerhouse batteries use a little threaded bolt, so there is a threaded nut built into the top of the battery. So depending on which battery you have, make sure you have the right connectors. Connect the wires to the battery before you lay the battery in place. So as you can see, we've got all these slots that are cut into the bottom of the box, and that will allow you to change for a different size battery with the strap. So with each kit, you're going to get a battery strap. For the small shuttles, it's usually red. For the large shuttles, it's usually blue. So we want to make sure on this powerhouse lithium battery, it's a 30 amp hour battery. We want to make sure the terminals for the battery are towards the back of the box. So this would be the back. So we're going to place the battery in, and I'll just kind of tilt it up here. But we're going to place the battery in and move our wire harness out of the way so it doesn't create any issues. We're going to set it in the bottom of the battery box, and sometimes the battery or the wires for the switch will hit. This is a tall battery, so we're a little limited on size. So you may end up having to take the battery and rotate it slightly as well. So that fits better. So now we're going to work on putting the strap on top of the battery. So when installing the strap, the biggest thing you got to remember is on the taller or the bigger, thicker batteries like the Norsk 50 amp. That battery is going to sit really high in relation to where the shelf is. So we don't necessarily want to put the buckle on the top so it interferes with the top plate. So we're going to try and position the buckle either at the very front of the shuttle or the back of the shuttle. Again, this is the back. I prefer it at the back, so if you ever have to try and remove the battery, you don't have to take everything out. But most times it's going to be better just to take the center plate out with the graph to access the wiring and the battery. So we're going to drop this strap down. We are going to go through the slot in the front. The strap will then come up across the bottom of the shuttle, and we're going to look on the inside and kind of gauge where the strap needs to come back up. We can feed the strap through the buckle just like that, and then we can pull the loose end. So again, I'm going to try and position the buckle so that it is at the back of the shuttle or at the front of the shuttle, not on top of the battery. So I'm going to reposition this a little bit. And pull that strap tight. So now you can see that our battery is installed in the shuttle and it's not coming loose. All right, so we have our cables ran, our connectors connected to the switches, our charging port in the back connected. Now we're ready to place the center section with the head unit, gimbal, and also the black box onto the shuttle. So we're going to start by routing both of these cables through this opening on the bottom side of the plate where the gimbal is. And keep in mind, we talked about it earlier, where to place the holes. And these connectors are right at the size where we might need to loosen it, but I think I can get both connectors in. So those are perfect. So now we're going to take and we're going to set this center section onto the ice shuttle. Again, we have both cords ran up. Don't forget about the long ground wire that we need to connect to the back of the black box. So we've got that there. Tuck all of our wires back up underneath. So now there's going to be 6 screws that we're going to need to connect everything. There'll be 2 on this side, 2 on the opposite side, and 2 up front. So again, we'll grab our driver. We're going to start with the 2 screws on the front. There should be 2 nut zerts or rib nuts installed at the front of the shuttle. We're just going to start those. We're not going to tighten them yet. And then we're going to work around our way to the side. All right, so now we need to make our network connections and our power connections between the 106 and the black box. So we ran our 2 power cables up from the bottom. So we're going to need to find the power cable for the GLS 10. So we are going to connect that power cable. And then we're going to connect the power cable for the 106. We're going to screw both of those down. Now we need to connect one of our networks. So there's 2 network ports on the back. As far as I know, it does not matter which one you connect to, but we will grab the network cable that was provided with the LS34 and the GLS. So we do have the network cable to connect the 2. We are using the stock cable. They do make a short cable. It's only about that long. It's for their ice fishing bundle. This customer decided that he wanted to use this cable, so we are going to end up zip tying these up kind of behind the black box just to try and keep everything nice and tidy. So we're gonna come over, put it to the network port on the GLS-10 with the small end, and then the large end we're gonna come over and connect into the back of the docking station. So we're gonna tighten both of those down. I now have a couple zip ties that I am going to zip tie these together, and then we're just gonna kind of tuck them in behind the graph until we can kind of get everything situated the way that we want. Don't forget to trim your zip ties. So both network cables are in. We're going to mount. I believe the Garmin is going to be best about there. So we're going to just snug up these 2 connectors. So you will need to remove the plastic cover in order for the 106 to snap into place. So that comes off. We'll put that back here behind. Kind of tuck it down into the bottom so it's not blowing around or getting caught on anything. And then we're going to grab the 106 and we're going to pop it into position on this docking station. All right, so we have our 106. We have the docking station, the back release unclamped. We're going to put the bottom in first, and then we're going to press down on the toggle, and it should snap right into place. All right, so we have our ground wire connected for our GLS-10 on the black box. We have our quick mount port mounted. All of our wires are tucked in nice and tight. Everything looks good. Our network cable is tucked in behind the graph. Now it's the moment of truth. So the first switch should be the GLS-10 box, and then the second switch should be the head unit itself. So I'm going to try the head unit. Power switch came on. Head unit comes on. And now we can check the black box. If we flip this on, there should be a little red indicator light on the back of the box that will come on. The transducer is not plugged in, but the red light will come on, indicating that it does have power. So we're going to let this power up. So we have the 106 installed on our standard shuttle. All the switches work. The GLS-10 is wired. The ground wire is wired. Everything turned out great. The quick connect port on the back for your charger is in. This makes it super easy to be able to charge this as soon as you get home, or if you have a newer vehicle and you have a 110 accessory port in it, it makes it easy to charge on the way to and home from the lake. If you have any questions about any of the marine products that we have, or any concerns or need help with anything, reach out to us through Facebook or Instagram. Go to the website, send us an email, tkicnc.com. Hopefully you have a great summer, and we look forward to seeing you on the water.